What's it like to live as a female expat in Asia? If something goes wrong and I run out of money, will my embassy help me get home? And how much stuff should I pack when I decide to make the big move? Well, if those questions or anything about the female expatriate experience are of interest to you, great to have you with me. My name is Wendy, and for more than 3 decades, I have lived and worked in 5 different countries in Asia. And I still live and work in Asia, now in Thailand. Today, I want to talk to you about parenting in Asia as an expatriate. And I can only come at it from a woman's perspective as a mum. So these are my thoughts and some observations that I have. I've got 3 kids who were raised in Asia. 2 of them were born in Asia, and the other one was gestated in Asia, you might say, and then moved to Asia at a very young age. But they're millennials now, they're older millennials. So this is from a long time ago. And yes, some things have changed, but essentially the idea of bringing your family to Asia or making a family in Asia, some of the principles pretty much remain the same. The first term you need to become familiar with is the third culture kid. There's lots of literature about third culture kids, and you can look it up online, and there are books that have been written and psychologists have written books about it. Why is it such a hot topic? Well, a third culture kid is someone who is raised, obviously, in a third culture. And that third culture is actually the expatriate child's culture. It's a separate culture all of its own. So let me explain that a little bit more. Let's take the example of my children. Okay, so they were raised in what is essentially a Western household. The culture within our family was a Western culture, Christmas and all the things that come with that. Our family values based around a Western ideology of what families do and how they operate. And our friends were, other expats and all of that kind of stuff. So a Western upbringing. But the difference was when they opened the door, they're not living in the West, they're living in the East. And the culture is very different. So they grew up with the festivals of the local people, they understood the local food. They weren't living in native English-speaking countries, so that was different. Their friends were from all over the place. They were living essentially an Asian lifestyle, but being Westerners. But here's the thing, because they didn't know any different, it's not like me, I'd grown up in Western countries. So because they didn't know any different, it wasn't that they noticed an enormous difference as soon as they went out the door. This was their existence. This was their reality. This was their upbringing. And they kind of had a foot in one camp of what was outside the door. So whether it be Chinese culture, Malaysian culture, whatever it was. And they also had the Western culture at home, and then they had their group of friends who were just like them. Expat kids, sometimes called expat brats, which is a bit mean, and it's not really true, but that's a nickname that's given to them. So they actually had their own culture, their third culture, where they were a little bit of this, a little bit of that, and a lot of this thing in the middle. There's a lot of research about expat kids or third culture kids because sometimes those people, as they grow up, they can feel a little bit disconnected from all of the cultures. They feel kind of separate. You've got blonde hair and green eyes, and all of your mates look different to you. You're a different size and shape. You have different food at lunchtime. All of the people that you know travel all of the time or have different experiences. And then you try and kind of slot yourself into the home country culture, maybe when you go to school or go to university or leave home, something like that. And that doesn't quite fit. It doesn't quite gel. But by the same measure, if you go to your Asian classmate's house and maybe you even speak the local language, or you completely understand what's going on in terms of culture and food and all the other things, but you don't quite fit in there as well. Now, these kids, as they grow to be adults, realize that when they have the question like, where are you from? The answer is either incredibly extended or incredibly short. Do you want the long version? Do you want the short version? Well, I was born here and my family moved here, and then we did this and then we did that. And there's always other questions about that. What did your family do? What did your dad do? What did your mum do? Why did you move around so much? So there's a whole lot of confusion around that. And these third culture kids who are brilliant, by the way, and very integrated and very flexible and adaptable and usually quite warm and friendly, do sort of struggle a little bit as adults. Interesting things happen to expat kids, and I want to talk about that a bit later in the video. But this is a term that you need to understand. So if your intention is to move children or move your kids out of your home country and into Asia, or you're planning to make a family as an expat, you need to think about the impact that your lifestyle choice is going to have on your children. Because from our perspective as the parents, we just think it's brilliant. I mean, there's a reason why we've moved. We think it's great. We're going to move to this other country. We're going to do these other things, blah, 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 blah. And our kids might not necessarily have a choice in that decision. And what happens in their life is just as valid. The way that they're feeling about it is just as valid. I've learned, talking to my children now that they're adults, that some of the choices that we thought were just brilliant ideas actually made them feel a little bit lonely at times. We moved them from schools at critical times. But for us, it was a new adventure. And for them, it was kind of a new adventure, but also came with some anxiety, some fears about making new friends and fitting into a new place and all of that kind of stuff, let alone not having extended family to lean on. And that's something that you need to think about too. Western families tend to be very kind of nuclear, right? We build our little pockets, and you might be lucky enough to live with extended family. But if you're an expat, you're not going to have extended family. That's very, very rare. So you'll be relying on things like domestic help, maids or babysitters or nannies or something like that to help raise your kids. It won't be auntie and uncle. It won't be grandma. The only time you might go and see those people might be once or twice a year, if that, to catch up at Christmas or something like that. And then you present these kids with these people and you say, this is your family, here's your family. Don't you fit in? But they don't quite fit in. And as an adult, speaking to my adult daughter, I've realized that some of the things that I just thought were magical, she actually found a little bit stressful as a young person, particularly as a teen. And that's a valid point. So I'm not saying it's a bad thing. Being an expat is brilliant, but you do have to keep in mind that if you're moving another person around as well, and they don't actually have a choice in that move, you have to be sensitive to how they're feeling and what their life and their lifestyle and their experiences are going to be. So coming back to this idea of the extended family, in most Asian cultures, families are, they stick together, and there is a big culture of extended family values, right? So grandma and granddad might live with adult children, and they might take care of the younger kids and all that kind of thing. Our Western idea of what families are and how we raise our children might be a little bit different. So we're all about independence, Kids turn 18 or they've finished university, they've got to get out there and they've got to start, earning money or taking care of themselves, and they tend to be very independent. Whereas in Asian cultures generally, there's more interdependence within the family unit. There's more of an emphasis on the extended family values and the hospitality that surrounds that. That even extends when these kids grow up to be adults. So, for example, I work with a lot of very I would describe them as middle class Thais, and even very highly qualified women with great jobs feel an incredible obligation at a certain age to go back and take care of their older family members. Now, I think it's a little bit unfair that their brothers are not asked to do the same thing, but that's just part of their culture. That's just part of their family values. So for us, though, if our folks get a little bit old, we start looking at nursing homes or how they remain independent. But in Asian cultures, that's not necessarily the same. I'm painting a big brushstroke here, but generally speaking, the families will kind of cohese together, and they'll bring somebody into the household. Maybe they'll go in Thailand, they'll go up country and take care of grandma until she passes, or mum until she passes, and then go back to having this independence. These are very different cultures. And here we are with our own kids inside of that. Some of my colleagues have asked me over the years, the first thing that they ask me is, do your children send you money? Well, no. mean, that would be great, wouldn't it? But they do. As soon as they've got enough money to be able to send back, they send the money back into the family, because that's how the family works, right? Everybody contributes, particularly if your family are, a little bit poorer and you've got a big job in the city. Then the idea is you support the family by sending money back. But for us, we tend to think, well, as soon as you're independent, you can take care of yourself, off you go, and I'll take care of myself too. So slightly different values there. But here we are bringing our own kids into this kind of mix. So it's all these things that you have to think about. I often get asked as well, don't your children want to live with you? Well, no, I don't think that they do. And honestly, I'm not sure that I would want them living with me full time either, because we just do it differently. It's a different kind of culture, keeping in mind that that not everybody is like this. But in truth, the Western values of what is like family harmony and the Eastern values of what is family harmony are not necessarily on the same page. I'm sure everybody's heard of this idea of tiger mums, right? Tiger mums are this sort of legendary Asian parents who hover around their kids and make sure that they succeed, because that type of thing is very important. The school that I went to in Sydney, which is called Sydney Girls High, which is a scholastically selective school, back in the day, and keeping in mind that I'm old, but back in the day, there was a percentage of Asian students there. I look at pictures now, and there's a far higher percentage of Asian students in there, and I understand why, because to go to that school you have to sit an exam, and the parents in Asian families, as we know, they drive their kids hard for academic success, and there's nothing wrong with that. There's absolutely nothing wrong with that, because they value that very much and they want their kids to succeed, and I'm totally here for it. I totally understand it. But it's very important in Asian cultures that the next generation does better and better and better. And that does cause a lot of problems and a lot of pressure for a lot of kids in Asian families, that the tiger mum thing is not necessarily a very positive thing always. But there's that expectation within the family. Whereas in the West, we tend to be a little bit, do as you feel, and if you want to be a crazy artist or, you do what you want to do. And sometimes in Asian cultures, there's a lot of pressure to succeed, and by that I mean financially. Whereas our culture, of course, we want our kids to succeed, but we also, focus as well on some of the other values and qualities that we see as equally important. Very, very different. And all this time, we're bringing kids into an environment where they're observing both of these sides and asking themselves, where do they fit in? Now, let's talk about whether or not it's a good thing or a bad thing to bring kids into the mix when you're talking about the expatriate lifestyle. Obviously, for me, I think it's a good thing. If I was to do it all over again, I would probably try and be more sensitive to what was actually going on in the minds of my kids, as opposed to in the minds of myself, where I thought everything was swimming along nicely. And now looking back, like I said, having had conversations with my adult daughter, thinking, okay, while I was delighted that we were going to this new place, you might have had some apprehension that you didn't express at the time because you didn't want to be seen as a downer, or because you're a kid and you didn't know how to say it. So that is something to think about. Now, let's touch briefly on education. If you are deciding to have a family in Asia or move your family in Asia. Education, as we know, comes in all kinds of colours. So you've got your public school system, and by that I mean the non-paying one, or like the government one. You've got your semi-private, so maybe like a Catholic school or something that's a little bit less expensive, or semi-private, not too expensive. Then you've got your private school option. And then you've got something that is newer since the days of my kids growing up, and that would be the homeschooling option. There's nothing wrong at all with sending your kids to the local school if you're moving to Asia, but keep in mind that language can be an issue, particularly if they're older. If they're young, they'll pick up the language just like kids pick up language like a sponge, right? They just suck it up and that'll be no problem at all. But if you're moving, let's say, a 10-year-old or an 11-year-old into a new country, and you realize that the best way is immersion, and we're going to pop them in the local public school and everything will be fine. Not only will they be struggling with the language issue, but they might also be struggling with some of the culture issues as well, and they'll be seen as different. Here in Thailand, I have friends who are what they call lukrung. That means half-half. So, mum is from one, maybe Caucasian, and dad is Thai, or the other way around. And it's funny, actually, without fault, all of them say, as they were growing up and they became adults, they always say, I was never Thai enough for the Thais, and I was never Western enough for the Westerners. And that's something that you need to think about too. So, yep, public school, fine, but pay attention to how your child is doing. And if they're struggling, keep in mind that this is their shot at being a young person. If they're struggling, you need to be really sensitive. Semi-private, you're going to get what you pay for. Private, damned expensive, honestly. In Asia, if you're sending your kids to an international school, and we send our kids to international school, oh my God, could have bought like houses all along the Sydney waterfront for the same amount of money. But those were the options that we had. Excellent education, I cannot fault it, but it's going to cost you a packet. And if you're not getting that covered by a company, if you're trying to do that by yourself, that is a real factor, particularly if you're moving to a smaller place, like a large town or a small town. If you're in the cities, you've probably got a better chance. But in the smaller towns, there'll be one or two options and they will be expensive. And then there is homeschooling, of course. And if you've got a good network of people for them to hang out with outside of those school hours, that'll work just fine. But if you don't, please do think about the socializing that they need to do as well. So generally speaking, I think that raising your kids, as expat brats, I think it's great, generally speaking. But please do be sensitive to the idea that whilst you might be having a fabulous time and thinking of all of the great opportunities that the whole family is having, your child might have some questions that need to be answered. Your child might have some sensitivities where they're not feeling connected, or they're distressed or something like that. They might not express it to you at the time, but you need to kind of be aware of how they are feeling and really talk to them about the realities of what's going on. Be sensitive to that, so that your delight at this new experience is also their delight at this new experience, and it's not just all about you. I hope that's answered a couple of questions for you, or at least brought up some ideas that you might have about what to think about if you've decided to move your family overseas. I will share a funny story that I have. My mother-in-law, former mother-in-law, who has now passed away and was a lovely lady, don't get me wrong. One of my children, the middle one, was born in Hong Kong. She said to me, but when he stops breastfeeding, what will he eat? Will he have to eat rice? And I said, no, he'll just eat farrics or, whatever that, that mush stuff that you give babies, mashed up mangoes, I don't know, that kind of thing. Because she was quite concerned that my child, who was going to grow up in a Chinese culture, would only be able to eat Chinese food. Of course, you can buy absolutely everything that you need for your baby in all of these countries, no problem at all. That's not a thing. And keep in mind as well, having given birth in Malaysia as well, women give birth in all kinds of places around the world, in fields, under tables, and in really fancy hospitals, and the babies just turn out fine. So you're going to have good medical care, don't worry about that. You're going to have good post and prenatal care, don't worry about that. You're going to find food and toys and baby groups for your baby. All of that stuff's going to happen. You're not moving to the moon, you're just moving to Asia. All right, have yourself a great day. If you'd like to leave a comment, if you've had a child in Asia or raised a child in Asia, if there's anything that you're worried about or some topic that you'd like me to cover, just give my 10 cents worth of opinion on it, do feel free to leave a comment down below. Don't forget to like and subscribe. That really helps the channel. I hope you have yourself a fantastic day. Check out some of the other videos that'll pop up soon, and I'll speak to you later. Bye.